In the previous video, we have successfully implemented the data validation in our NestJS application. In this video, we'll talk about the core function of NestJS, the module. NestJS uses module to organize and manage everything in the application. As you can see, every function you have to develop in your NestJS application will be embedded in module. For example, user module, order module, chat module, task module. So everything will be defined by a module. The module has some properties: providers, controllers, imports, and exports. The providers contain the providers that will be instantiated by NestJS injector and may be shared at least across this module. So every service or every value you want to be directly by default injected in the module, you have to define it in the providers. For example, if you want to inject by default code service or Prisma service, you have to define it in the providers. Controllers. Controllers is the set of controllers defined in the module. Don't forget that controllers handle HTTP requests. Import is the list of imported modules that export the providers, which are required in this module. Export is the subset of providers that are provided by this module to another module. So it will be available in other module, which imports this one. By default, we have module, which handles everything. And as you can see, every time we create a new resource, it directly imports it in the app module. For example, user module, task module, all module. We create a new module for Prisma. We need it to interact with our database, Prisma. As you can see, it automatically adds Prisma module in app module. And there is a new folder called Prisma, and inside it we have Prisma module. We also need to create a service, NestJS service Prisma. Prisma module is a function which interacts with our database. Every time we need to add some data or to collect some data from our database, we need to use Prisma service or Prisma module. Every time our application is launched, we need to initialize a Prisma service. So replace this line by this one. Wait. So Prisma service extends Prisma client, which is exported from Prisma client. Okay. And then implement on module init, which is imported from NestJS common. Okay. So after that, it is asynchronous function on module init. And you see this line, await this connect. That means that Prisma will connect to our database. And now we need to export Prisma service because we will use Prisma service in another module. So exports Prisma service. Okay. Now we can use Prisma service in another module. Now we will work in user module. Open the users folder, open user module. Now in module, we need to define where to handle HTTP request. It is controller. So open user controller. As you can see, by default, NestJS generates for us the default CRUD operation. Remember that while creating the resource, we specify that it is a REST API. And NestJS CLI asks us if we want to generate CRUD entry points when we say yes. When we are executing this command, nestj resource users. Okay. So this command line is responsive for the default source code we have here. Let's analyze it. In controller, the default request will come in the endpoint user. For example, HTTPS, your domain name .com/users. Okay. Now the HTTP request post here is for create. And as you can see, for parameter, it is request body and then create user detail. Remember the DTO, the data validation, we have already created here. So that means that our controller HTTP request is waiting for input data which matches the DTO we have created here. So I mean name, email, and password. Okay. After that, we have get. HTTP request get. That means that it is this route. Get, by default, get is for find all, to retrieve all data. After that, get by ID is to retrieve one user from database. And HTTP request patch, and finally delete. Right. Here in the controller, we have already the default route defined. So we don't need to modify anything for the moment. We'll come back in controller when we will be in the part for authorization, and permissions. One thing you have to notice is the injection of the user service in the constructor of controller in this line. As you can see, user service, which handles business logic, is directly injected in the constructor of the user's controller. Now open the file user service. Here, as you can see, by default, we have default methods: create, find all, find one, update, and remove. We need to start by adding constructor. And in this constructor, we add private reads only Prisma service, type Prisma service. At this stage, you can already test your API endpoints. To test it, first of all, launch the project npm run start dev. Okay, we have an error. User module Prisma service. Yes, we call Prisma service, but we don't import it in our user module. So we need to import Prisma module. Good. Now we can test our API endpoints. Oh, we have another error. My bad. I didn't launch my server. Let's fix it. Now we were good. NestJS application successfully started. You can use Postman or any other tools. The endpoint here is localhost 300 users. Send request. Right. You see here the answer. This action returns all users, and is what we have put here. User controller. No, sorry, user service here. Find all. You can change it and write here is my user find all. save it. We test the endpoints. Good. Here is my user find all. So as you can see, the controller here is successfully redirecting the request to the service. And in the service, we have the response. Okay. Now let's implement the interactions with database. First of all, we need to create a new user. To create a user, we have to follow some steps. First of all, before creating a user, we have to check if a user already exists in our database. So constant existing user. Uh, we have to define this function as asynchronous await this dot Prisma service dot user dot find unique. Find unique is a function related to model of Prisma. So find unique where the unique value inside user is let's check it quickly, email. I think let's confirm it. Wait, email is unique. So to check if a user already existed in a database, we have to check if the email is already in the database. So email, where email is equal to param create user DTO dot email. Okay. So if user exists, if existing user, then return so throw new exception conflict exception and say that this email already exists. Don't forget error handling. Okay. If not, we can now create a user. But before creating a user, don't forget that we have to use a password, which is not what the user directly sends. Passwords hash. We will hash the password, the default password for user. So await Eclipse. We have to import Eclipse. Let's import Eclipse. We have already installed it. So we have to import it. So import Bcrypt from Bcrypt. If you have not already installed Bcrypt, please do it. Just okay. Just run command npm install Bcrypt. That's Bcrypt and launch it. Okay, we have already Bcrypt installed, so we can now continue. Okay, Bcrypt. Okay, good. Hash. The password we have to hash is what the user has sent us from DTO. So create user DTO passwords. After that, the second argument of this is salt. Salt here by default is 10. Salt here means the number of rounds the hash methods will take to encrypt your data. Now we can create a user in the database. So constant user is now this Prisma service user and call the method create. Okay, good. So the data we need to create a user name. We need the name which comes from create user DTO name. If you want to change the name or add some fields, you can do it here. After that, email, which also comes from create user DTO email. Password, which is word hash. Okay. We also need the role. Oh, my bad. We forgot to add role in the DTO. Role ID. We need role ID. Create user. Okay, my bad. So let's quickly fix it. Come here. And we need role ID because remember that in our user model, we have here role ID, which is of type int, and it is linking to role. So quickly fix it here. Role ID is int, okay, is type int, role ID, okay. Then come back in user service, okay. Now we will have role ID. Okay. Here we created a user using Prisma service, and as I said, Prisma service will handle all operations with database. Now we can return the new created user here. Return user. Good. If you want to fetch all user, simply do this. Find all. Return this Prisma service user. Find many. Okay. And don't forget to add return type. Return type here is the type of promise of type user. Import user from Prisma client. Okay. Here, find all also is a way of user. Find one. Okay. Find one return type will be user or null. So find one, this Prisma service user finds unique, yeah, find unique, where ID, sorry, ID equals to ID. Okay. And finally, for updates, it will return promise of type user, and return is this Prisma service user update. Okay. Update where ID equals to ID, and where data will be update user DTO. Okay. Promise user. Return this Prisma service user deletes where ID equals to ID. Wait, we have finished CRUD functions to handle user operations. Now let's test it. Check the console if you don't have any error. Okay. Okay. Now we can start by fetching all user in our database. Okay, good. Empty array. Now let's create a new user. It is a post request, localhost 3000 users, body. Okay, JSON. We need a role ID, one, a name, sorry, John Doe, email, john@gmail.com, and a password, John. Yeah. And now we can launch it. Send. We have a message. At least one upper case character is required for the password. As you can see, this message comes from our DTO. Remember this line in create user for the password. At least one uppercase character is required. Uppercase, lowercase, sorry. Okay. So this message directly comes from our DTO. Means that our data validation is successfully working. So let's change password. Okay, John. Yes, John. Simple. At least one digit. John 1. Okay. One special character. John. It's okay. Right. We have now a new user created in our database. John Doe. Let's create a second user. We'll have an error. Yes, this email already exists. Conflict error. So the source code we have written here is successfully working. This if condition. Okay, this email already exists. So we need to change name and email. Anne Sophia. Email and password and next one. Okay. Wait, we have a second user. Come here and fetch our user. Great, fantastic. As you can see, we now have the two users we have already created in our database. And if you check your database locally, you will see those two data. Good. Now we can move on and create a task and role. Come back in our source code and we'll do the same thing to create it, the remaining model. I mean task and role. For task, it will be simple. The task is linking to user ID. So we need to add user ID in our DTO for task. Task, create task. We need to add the decorator is int, and then user ID of type number. Okay. Now come in task module and imports. Oh, sorry. Prisma module. come in task controller to check if all CRUD endpoints are successfully implemented. Yes, we have. Now come in task service to handle our business logic. We need a constructor. Just copy it from here. It's here. Imports it. Okay. Let's check. Okay, Prisma Module is already imported. Okay, good. Now create task. To create a task, just copy what we have already done in create user, but we don't need to check if a task already exists. We will simply create directly the task. Copy this, paste it here, and change it. Constant task. Prisma service task. Create. For a task, we need open the detail to check a user ID, name, description, and status. So user ID, which comes from create last TTO, user ID, a name, a description, and finally status. And then return task. Okay. For the task, we can also handle something. We can check if user ID is correct before saving the task. So it is a to do after. Okay. Find all tasks, and for sure the return type is promise of type task. Find all tasks. Here we return a promise of type and array of task. Return disk Prisma service task. Find all. Sorry. Find many. Sorry. Okay. In find many, for every task, we will include user for every task. So in find many, we will add option includes user to say that we want to add all related user for a task. Find one. This. Find one task, return one task, or no, it's not friends. So return this Prisma service task, find unique where ID equals to ID of the parameter. Updates task, return this Prisma service task, updates where ID equals to ID of parameter, and use data which comes from update task TTO. Finally, to delete a task, we will return this Prisma service task delete where id equals to id of parameter. Okay. Wait. Now we can also register a task. So open your Postman, create a new tab here, post request, localhost 300 task. Okay, body. For a task, I need to send user ID, name, description, and status. User ID 1 refers to user ID we got from here, 1 and 2. Name of the task. Complete the code review of the app. Description. Please complete the code review of the task management app. We change the title here and say simply code review over here. Okay. And for status, let's check what we have defined in our enum. For status of task, we define enum to do, in progress, and done. So by default, it is to do. Okay. Now send the request. Great. We have new task created for user 1. Create also another task for user 2. Is UI design. Please complete the design of login screen. Check login unit design. Okay. For user 2, codes. Create a new test to check. Yes. Okay. Fantastic. As you can see, we have retrieved the task we already created in our database. And also here you see user objects comes with task objects. As we said, include user for task while retrieving the task. Okay. Here we have our two tasks. Fantastic. Now we can finally create from a role. Let's close unused file. Close. Task. Okay. Open role folder, role module. In module, you have to import Prisma Module. Okay. Now come in controller and check if all CRUD endpoints are well set up. Good. Now come in role service and let's create a role service. We will start by creating a constructor and inject in the constructor the Prisma service private with only Prisma service of type Prisma service. Okay. Okay. Uh, okay, we have already imported. Now create role. Sorry, I forgot one thing, my bad. In task service, we have to define all functions as async. Sorry, my bad. Async. And here it is await. Okay. Asynchronous function and await. Yeah. Asynchronous and await. Asynchronous and await. Asynchronous and await. Okay. Same thing for user. Let's check it quickly. Okay. Asynchronous await. That's why I stopped using await. Sorry. Asynchronous and await. Await. Okay. Come back in whole. Okay. Whole service. Okay. Asynchronous and await. Okay. Await this Prisma service whole create. Okay. To create a role, we need data of a role. And for a role, we need a name and permissions. Name comes from create role DTO name, and permissions, as it is already another object, we will do it this way. Okay. Then create role DTO permissions. Right. Found one role. We can use it by doing asynchronous function await this Prisma service role find unique where id equals to id of parameter. And while fetching the role include, we can include, yes, permissions. True. Okay. Great. As you can see, we have successfully implemented module controllers and also services for our in our model, and you can test it using any tool. For me, I use Postman, so you can, as you can see, for get requests user, you have those users in our database, and we can also get task. Yeah, here is our task. What to use of our plugin use. Right.